This is the Volkswagen ID4. Think of it as a pure electric Volkswagen Tiguan, since that's pretty much what it's aiming to be. It's a mid-size family SUV, but it does share much of its parts with the Volkswagen ID3, or in fact with the Skoda Enyaq that we've also driven. So it gets an 82 kilowatt hour battery, or actually 77 kilowatt hour usable capacity, which is what you will see stated in all of Volkswagen's material. That gives it a range of up to 323 miles, which is all very good. Before we go any further, don't forget to subscribe to the CarGurus UK YouTube channel and turn on notifications so that you don't miss any of our videos. This particular car is a first edition model, which is available from launch. It's not going to be available forever, but if you can get hold of one, then it's a good way into a high-spec ID4 for a really good price. If you can't get hold of a first edition model, then the range starts from around about £41,000 and stretches right up to £50,000. And don't forget that you don't get the plug-in car grant anymore on cars of that price. Even so, it's still in the same price range as rivals like that Skoda Enyaq that I've mentioned, and also the Ford Mustang Mach-E. And also, it is a good looking thing as well, I think. It's got that really sleek, sort of slick profile to it that reminds me a little bit of an MPV rather than an SUV. There is something almost estate-like about it. And maybe this is just me, but the profile reminds me a little bit of the old Citroen Zara Picasso, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just that sort of streamlined look. Still, I really like the contrast line. I think the high-waisted look suits it. So yeah, it's a good looking car, and more than that, it's also very practical. So you get a really nice big boot. You're going to have absolutely no issues getting your big chunky double buggy or a pack of dogs or whatever in there. You also get some nifty underfloor cable storage, which is really useful. However, you don't get any storage in the nose of the car, which would be a bit better for cable storage. And also, if you fold those rear seats down, which split in a 60-40 split, then they leave quite a step up from the boot floor, so that's not so great either. Even so, it's still a really spacious, practical car. Space in the back seats is great too. There is masses of legroom and headroom, and the flat floor means that even a middle passenger will have reasonable foot space. However, there is no 7-seat option in the ID4. It's nice and spacious and comfortable up here as well. Even somebody with really long legs is going to be able to find a good driving position because there's plenty of adjustability. Visibility is decent as well, although I have to say these A-pillars are very thick and they're very raked back. It's almost quite coupe-like, and you get this very sort of high sill, so there's not as much light coming in as you might think. Even so, it's very nice up here, and you do get decent equipment even on an entry-level ID4. So you get LED lights, you get your dual-zone climate control, your heated seats, and wireless phone charging as well. I do think that the mid-spec car is probably going to be more popular because you get keyless entry and reversing camera amongst a few other bits. But you do get the essentials at least. Now, you also get this 10-inch colour touchscreen as standard, and it's a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. You do get sat-nav, you also get Android Auto, wireless Apple CarPlay, and pretty much everything you'd want in terms of features. It's just not really easy enough to use, mainly because you have these touch-sensitive buttons under here for temperature control and volume, and it's way too easy to hit them by accident when you're trying to do other stuff on the screen. The screen doesn't always respond as quickly as you'd like either. So I think definitely more logical menus and do away with these touch sensitive buttons, and that would make the whole system easier to use. Other than that, it does at least do everything you want it to do. Now, before we get on to the driving bit, here are 5 things that you need to know about the Volkswagen ID4. Charging the ID4 will take under 13 hours from a normal 7 kilowatt home wall box. The cable that you need to plug into any Type 2 charger, including those home wall boxes, is included as standard. But you have to pay extra for a cable to connect to a normal 3-pin domestic plug. 125 kilowatt rapid charging is standard on every ID4. Just plug it into a fast enough ultra rapid charger via the CCS port in the car, and you'll get a 100-mile top up in around about 20 minutes. One of the more confusing options on the ID4 is the £1,000 heat pump. You do not need to add that just to get heating in the cabin, you do get that as standard. But the heat pump will make it more efficient, so it will drain the battery less and give you a slightly better range when you're using the heating a lot in winter. If the standard ID4 models like this one just don't seem exciting enough, you don't have long to wait for the solution. A 302 brake horsepower 4-wheel drive GTX variant is soon to arrive, or there is also a sleeker coupe crossover ID5 model to come. The ID4's haptic touch-sensitive steering wheel buttons look really cool, but to be honest, they don't make much sense and it's too easy to hit them by accident when you're driving. So that's what the ID4's like to live with, but what's it like to drive? It's a very slick thing, I have to say, the ID4. It's really nice to drive. This test car is on standard suspension, so it doesn't have the optional adaptive dampers that you can add. But for all that, it is actually, it rides really nicely. In fact, if anything, I think on standard suspension and sort of 19-inch wheels, it rides probably better than a car on adaptive because you get a bit less body movement. It steers nicely. 0 to 62 in 8.5 seconds, which is more than enough, and it feels really punchy even in the mid-range, so you can kind of go for an overtake and it feels like it's got more than enough power. Sure, you haven't got that kind of really explosive acceleration that you get from some EVs, including all the Teslas, and even some of the faster Ford Mustang Mach-E's feel usefully quicker than an ID4. But even so, I think definitely fast enough, smooth enough, and just a very easy car to drive. Everything feels very smooth and intuitive. And I'd say that that goes for the brake regen system as well. Now, brake regen is a system that means that when you lift off the throttle, the car is going to brake itself. And what that actually is the car harvesting energy to increase the range. So it's in every EV. Some of them are better than others. The Volkswagen's is very good. It's got an automatic system where it senses a junction coming up or a car in front, so it will actually automatically adjust that brake regen as you're approaching something in front of the car. That sounds like it could be intuitive, but to be honest, it's actually very easy to get used to, and before you know it, you'll be relying on it, and it can make things quite relaxing and nice, I have to say, particularly around town. Or you can stick it in B mode, and that brings the heaviest brake regen mode. It's not really one pedal driving as you get in a Nissan Leaf, but it means that you can get away with, if you predict what's going on up ahead, you can get away without using the brake too often around town. Now, in terms of range, it's not too bad, so we're seeing around about 220 to 230 miles, which is fine given we've been on the motorway a lot. But I would still expect more, to be honest, of Volkswagen. I think they need to work on the efficiency of their electric cars. The Mustang Mach-E, for example, actually is more efficient, even though it's more powerful and, you know, it's a bit quicker. So I think that shows that the ID4 could definitely be better on that front. Even so, the range in the ID4 is going to be more than enough for most people. And I would add that, as with every electric car, you're going to see a better range in the summer. So especially if you're around town most of the time, you might see that range eke up towards the 300 miles mark. In the winter, I think you're more likely to see it drop down towards more like 200 or less, especially if you're on the motorway for long periods of time in cold weather. One other interesting aspect of the ID4 is that this car can actually tow. So you can get a factory fit tow bar, and it can tow up to 1,000 kilos, which, it has to be said, by comparison to petrol and diesel alternatives is, well, it's pretty rubbish. But given that most other EVs aren't even rated for towing at all, at least it's something. There are certainly a few niggles with the ID4, that infotainment system, and more than that, just with the amount of touch-sensitive buttons. They just drive me a bit bonkers. They don't make a lot of sense, even if they look good. But for all of that, it's a really polished car. It's comfy to sit in, the finish is great, it's lovely to drive. And I can totally see why you would opt for this, even over rivals like the Skoda Enyaq, which I have to say is better value spec for spec, and the Ford Mustang Mach-E, which just drives with a bit more vigour on normal road stuff. So yes, it's got its flaws, but even so, this is a really comprehensive, very likeable family SUV. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and head to cargurus.co.uk for a whole host of fantastic used cars from top-rated dealers.